Nearly 2,403 American service members lost their lives in the Pearl Harbor assault. More than 1,100 soldiers died on the USS Arizona when an explosive device weighing 1,800 pounds detonated its ordnance, accounting for half of the losses. Hundreds more others went unrecognized for decades. The treatment of these Pearl Harbor victims after death is perhaps the most horrific aspect of their deaths. Learn the meaning of memorialization and discover details about the Pearl Harbor bodies that the public was unaware of in this video. Please remain seated till the very finish. The USS Arizona is the most recognizable ship that went down during the attack on Pearl Harbor. However, close by lies the USS Utah, an obscure ship with its own tragic history. Converted from a training and target ship before World War II began, the Utah had originally been commissioned in 1911. The Utah was attacked by Japanese torpedo bombers on the morning of December 7, 1941, while anchored on the western side of Ford Island. Although it was no longer used for combat, the ship was nevertheless registered as a U.S. Navy ship, and it sank quickly. The Utah capsized and sank within minutes, ensnaring hundreds of men within. The most horrific part is that the USS Utah still holds the remains of 58 soldiers, including Chief Water Tender Peter Tomich, who bravely remained at his position to assist other sailors in escaping, a feat for which he was awarded the Medal of Honor. However, the most astounding fact? Never was the ship retrieved by the Navy. As a somber monument to the sailors who perished, it lies half submerged where it fell. Something even more poignant. The Utah's tale is almost completely forgotten, in contrast to the USS Arizona, which has a memorial and permits burial of living crew members. However, the graves of the departed are still visited by relatives, who sometimes pay their respects by placing flowers on the water above the tomb. What lies under the surface of this sunken ship is more than meets the eye. It is a monument to unfathomable bravery, a fragment of history in motion, and a war tomb. If you thought you understood all there is to know about Pearl Harbor, put that thinking on wait. Up next, we'll uncover even more details about the dead that were discovered there. The first one will shock you. If you want to remember a story completely, you should watch it all the way to the conclusion. Under the direction of Bandmaster Frederick W. Kinney, Navy Band Unit 22 was formed in May 1941 by a group of youthful musicians, the most of whom were still in their teens. A few short weeks after they graduated from the Navy School of Music, they were sent aboard the USS Arizona. Why was this band special? They were more than simply musicians. They were also responsible for protecting the ship in times of danger and raising spirits with their music at rituals and feasts. They provided the crew with jazz and marches to keep them entertained, played the national song at flag-raising ceremonies every morning, and helped to make life on board a cruiser seem more regular. Yet underneath that placid exterior, they were prepared for anarchy. Each had a combat station, and during wartime, their instruments were substituted for perilous duties below ship, like as loading ammo for the enormous cannons. Christmas Day, 1941, followed. Japanese jets screeched into the sky that morning as the band warmed up for their performance at the colors ceremony. Quickly abandoning their instruments, the musicians dashed to their posts in the line of battle. A bomb went off in the forward magazine just minutes after the band was stationed there. After penetrating the ship's hull at 8:06 a.m., they were all gone in an instant, all 21 members of Navy Band Unit 22. On the exact day they were getting ready to perform, they were entangled in one of the most terrible events in American history. Isn't that eerie? Even more tragic is the events leading up to that day. The band had just advanced to the finals of the Navy's boisterous Battle of Music band competition. Later that month, there was supposed to be the last performance, but it never took place. Navy musicians decided to memorialize the USS Arizona Band in the most emotional way after the attack. They gave them first place posthumously. After being renamed and inscribed with all 21 names, the trophy is now housed at the Arizona Memorial Museum. Isn't it remarkable how a humble trophy became a strong symbol of bravery, skill, and camaraderie? It serves as a poignant reminder that the fallen weren't only sailors, but also creatives, buddies, and young men who found ways to smile despite the horrors of war. Hundreds of American families continued to grapple with the profound and anguishing question of where their ancestors were laid to rest for decades after the Pearl Harbor assault. Recovered remains from ships like the USS Oklahoma were interred in 46 community graves in the Honolulu Cemetery following the catastrophic 1941 raid. Those things called markers, grave markers made of plain granite bearing the solemn word, unknown. This was more than a case of missing persons. It marked the start of one of the most poignant military mysteries in American history. Forensic science in the 1940s couldn't do much to piece together dismembered bodies because of the limitations of the available science. Only 35 of the approximately 430 sailors and Marines lost at sea on the Oklahoma could be positively identified. The remainder were laid to rest in 1949 in the Punch Bowl, or National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific, without any names or closure. What if you had no idea what became of your sibling, son, or spouse for decades? That kind of quiet would kill one guy. After being concerned by the obscurity of his dead companions' graves, Pearl Harbor survivor Ray Emery embarked on a relentless personal crusade. He meticulously searched through files, comparing death certificates and lists of casualties. He pondered the possibility that the mysteries weren't so mysterious after all. He was correct, it seems. When the military uncovered a single coffin in 2003 and discovered the remains of more than 100 people, a startling finding, but also a turning point, his labor had led to this monumental discovery. The exhumation of all Oklahoma mysteries was authorized by the Department of Defense in 2015. A hitherto unheard of 92% identification rate for instances of this age was achieved when 361 out of 394 crew members could be positively identified using modern DNA, dental record, and anthropological techniques. The time of notification was emotionally taxing for families like Carol Sowers, who tragically lost 2 relatives on the Oklahoma. She said it was a mixed bag of emotions. It took 80 years, but they're home. This initiative did more than just bring people together. It set in motion a larger movement. Proof that even the longest-running military mystery may be resolved was demonstrated by the success of the Oklahoma Project. A combination of human perseverance and contemporary scientific knowledge has allowed hundreds of courageous people to reassume their identities and rightful position in history. They should get at least that, right? The tale of the Trapp brothers, Harold and William from La Porte, Indiana, who were born and raised together and perished as a unit at the worst hour in American history, is one of the several moving human tragedies interwoven throughout Pearl Harbor's history. Harold and William were 2 of 8 siblings raised together, and they had a unique relationship because they were born 18 months apart and were close in spirit as well as in age. The brothers joined the Navy in 1939 as a unit. Did you feel obligated to do it? Is it sisterhood? Probably both. William was listed as a machinist's mate first class, and Harold as a fireman first class on the USS Oklahoma, where they were both stationed. As the impending war storm drew near, the Trapp family's pride in their 2 boys stationed at Pearl Harbor was tempered by their anxiety. After that, on December 7, 1941, the USS Oklahoma was hit by Japanese torpedoes and sunk within 15 minutes. Harold and William were 2 of 429 servicemen that perished while trapped below deck. Amidst the mayhem of war, 2 innocent lives, brimming with potential and camaraderie, vanished without a trace. For over 80 years, their remains were misidentified, as were many others. When faced with such unpredictability, how can a family ever truly rest? Scientific progress brought a glimmer of optimism back in 2015. With the use of DNA testing and dental data, the USS Oklahoma Identification Project was initiated by the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency to reunite missing persons with their families. Suddenly, in November of 2020, the Trapp family received word. Harold and William had been found 2 days apart. Carol Soar, their niece, who knew them only via tales, said the news made her cry. During the funeral, she declared, "This is where they belong." Thus, the Trapp brothers returned home on June 15, 2021. Their interment at Greenwood Cemetery, the same village where they played as youngsters, was marked by full military honors, folded flags, and a rifle salute. They were put to rest side by side. Isn't it amazing how time, love, and a touch of science can restore? Their return home represents more than just a family's healing. It's a nation's act of remembering and paying due tribute to them. Science has done something quite remarkable. It is assisting families who have suffered for decades without knowing what became of their loved ones who perished at Pearl Harbor in finally finding closure. The Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency, DPA, is doing incredible work using modern DNA technology to identify remains that were previously listed as unknown. It's incredible that we can use modern technology to solve riddles that have persisted for more than 80 years. Careful and very significant work goes into the procedure. The mitochondrial DNA, which is inherited from mothers and persists longer in fossils, was first the focus of scientific inquiry. The problem is that it was difficult to distinguish amongst military members because many of them had similar parental origins. After then, what were the researchers' next steps? They broadened their strategy. For additional in-depth investigation, they utilized nuclear DNA and Y chromosome testing to track paternal lineages. However, SNP capture technology was the true game-changer. In fact, this technique is able to hone in on over 95,000 markers inside a sample, and may work with aged, deteriorated, or chemically treated remains as well. When you give it some thought, that's fairly remarkable. And the end outcome? They are quite convincing. The USS Oklahoma had a success rate of 92%, which was far higher than the DPAA's initial goal of 80%, thanks to the collection of more than 5,000 DNA samples. Out of 394 unknowns, 361 were identified. However, not all cases were simple. What occurs in the case of identical twins remains. In such cases, researchers had to rely on physical characteristics and dental data. Consider Harold and William Trapp. It wasn't until Harold was a hair taller that they were eventually identified. Surprisingly, the oil that covered most of the bones actually helped with identification. Who knew the oil from the attack might have been used to help preserve the bodies? However, fresh concerns are being brought up by DNA testing as it progresses. Is it okay to submit unidentified DNA to public databases in order to find matches? The question then becomes how to safeguard family privacy. The DPAA's objective remains unchanged in the face of adversity. Each and every one of our nation's fallen heroes will have a name and a tale told by them. Because, after everything that has happened, shouldn't they be able to return home? Assume you have a complete understanding of Pearl Harbor. Give it another thought. The bodies that were discovered and the subsequent actions taken with them contain some of the most shocking details. Honor, sorrow, and a terrible secret buried for decades all come together in this story. Stay till the very end. You won't regret it. Many consider the USS Arizona Memorial to be a moving and significant memorial to the sailors and airmen who perished in the Pearl Harbor assault. However, what sets it apart from a simple memorial? Not only does it serve as a cemetery for the men who died on the sinking battleship, but it is also a one-of-a-kind and intimate site where survivors may, in a way, meet their dead friends and relatives. How did this somber and significant location come to be? Have you ever given it any thought? Inspiring and fueled by genuine dedication, the tale of the memorial's inception is both improbable and full of resolve. A long-term monument wasn't immediately planned to be constructed following World War II. Oh, there was one guy, Robert Ripley. Yes, the same Ripley who was responsible for Ripley's Believe It or Not, felt touched enough to propose a permanent memorial to the Arizona to the Navy. Envision this. A man who is famous for his strange anecdotes takes the initiative to build a sacred spot. However, because to cost concerns, the Navy originally turned down the plan. Yet, that was far from the conclusion of the tale. The fact that the Pacific War Memorial Commission had already been established by 1949 demonstrates the widespread interest in seeing this vision realized. A custom to remember the Arizona existed long before the memorial was even constructed. Admiral Arthur Radford started daily flag hoisting from the sinking ship's mainmast in 1950 as a gesture of respect and remembrance for the victims. The fact that this one small deed sparked an ongoing tradition is astounding, isn't it? Plaques and basalt stones were affixed to the ship in 1955, denoting its position and importance a few years down the road. We don't sure when the monument as we know it came into being, though. President Eisenhower's formal approval of a national memorial, paving the way for its construction, did not come until 1958. An inspiring illustration of how a community and a nation can unite in memory of sacrifice, the memorial's funding came from a combination of private contributions and government backing. The monument was finished and dedicated in 1962. So much meaning is conveyed by the design itself. Designed by Austrian-born architect Alfred Price, who himself had been interned during the war, the memorial's depressed center reflects the crushing defeat of the ship's sinking, while the elevated ends stand as symbols of America's triumph and resiliency. That contrast really encapsulates the essence of that time, doesn't it? After the tragic loss of life aboard the Arizona in 1982, one of the most heartbreaking traditions began. The option for survivors to have their ashes interred beneath the ship's hull upon death. In ceremonies replete with military honors, urns are reverently put beneath one of the ship's gun turrets, creating a very personal bond between survivors and their shipmates. This ritual emphasizes the tremendous respect for those who served and gave their lives. How does it feel to know that you and your departed companions can rest in peace forever? It's hard to fathom, but it's a testament to the lasting connection created throughout those terrible times in history. Nearly 1.8 million people visit the memorial each year, attracted by its emotional effect and historical significance. There are three primary parts to the memorial: the entrance, where guests arrive and start their tour; the assembly room, with 7 windows on each side to commemorate the attack date, December 7, 1941, and the shrine, which contains the names of the 1,177 crewmen who perished on the Arizona. Imagine the weight of that sacrifice as you stand among the names of those who never came back. Visitors may peer down into the sea and make out the sunken decks of the ship, which is both a terrifying and memorable sight, thanks to a huge hole in the memorial floor. The oil that seeps out of the ship's remains, sometimes referred to as its black tears, continues to do so even after all these years. It's as if the ship is wailing, a continual and quiet reminder of the lives being sacrificed and the cost of war. There is a direct physical link between the past and the present at the USS Arizona Memorial. Respect for the sacrifices made by those who perished in that attack, and for the survivors who have decided to remain with their ship indefinitely, is shown by this. The film prompts thought-provoking inquiries on recollection, bereavement, and the collective process of commemoration. How often do you find monuments that bring the living and the dead together in such a meaningful way? At the monument, guests are encouraged to contemplate not just the past, but also the bravery, grief, resilience, and eternal spirit of the people who served. As a result, the USS Arizona Memorial is more than a mere structure. It is a symbol of sacrifice and a site where visitors may feel a connection to the past. Most people's mental pictures of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor include blazing battleships, valiant sailors, and the unexpected destruction that rocked the United States military. What about those who weren't wearing uniforms, though? Those who weren't directly involved in combat, but yet put themselves in harm's way? On the Hawaiian island of Oahu, an attack on December 7, 1941, left 49 citizens dead and 35 more wounded. These were regular folks, the kind that history books like to ignore. Tragically, Janet Yumiko Ota, a 3-month-old infant, perished along with her mother and aunt when their home was damaged. Think of the tragedy that would ensue if a whole family was suddenly and unexpectedly killed, not in the heat of battle, but in the comfort of their own home. It was just the beginning of the disaster. Military installations, including as airfields and shipyards, employed a large number of civilians. Injuries sustained on the floating dry dock YFD-2 sent one shipyard worker to the hospital, where he or she joined sailors and Marines. Japanese planes bombed Honolulu's John Rogers Field, killing an innocent bystander in a strafing run. The catch is that not all civilians were killed by Japanese bombers. Many people died as a result of American defensive fire, which is shocking as it seems. It was not uncommon for anti-aircraft rounds that were intended to intercept the assailants to miss their targets and instead detonate in nearby areas after falling to the ground. The tragic tale of Jitsuo Hirasaki, a 48-year-old restaurant owner, his 3 daughters, a teenage relative, and 7 others who were murdered while having breakfast when the building was hit by a shell, is one of the most sad. Not only did Honolulu get hit, but Waipahu and Iwa as well. More casualties occurred because sugar mills, which are entirely civilian in character, were mistakenly targeted. It makes us wonder, how many such tales have slipped our ears? The World War II valor in the Pacific National Monument honors some of these innocent people who served during that era. The Pearl Harbor Visitor Center's exhibits and mini-documentaries have begun sharing their tales, bringing attention to this often overlooked period of history. And isn't it high time that their opinions were also taken into consideration? The reality of the dead left behind at Pearl Harbor is far more horrifying than what you will ever read about in history books. But everyone knows that it was a horrible event. And what about that peculiar incident, the Niihau incident? Everything shifted, as it turned out. Are you prepared to discover the things that teachers never said? Go all the way to the finish. The attack of Pearl Harbor gets all the attention when discussing December 7th, but there's another event that happened on that same day that few people know about. One that subtly influenced the contentious decisions that the United States made in the months that followed. The events began when Japanese pilot Shigenori Nishikaichi touched down on the tiny remote island of Niihau after crashing his damaged aircraft. Hawaiian tradition dictates that the wounded pilot be greeted and treated with care by the natives, who at first were unaware of what had transpired at Pearl Harbor earlier that morning. However, Such kind of hospitality wouldn't endure forever. Everything changed as soon as the island heard about the attack. Yoshio Harada, a local guy of Japanese ancestry, was requested to translate and maintain watch on the pilot. But then the unthinkable occurred. Harada changed sides. The shock must have been immense. He and Nishikaichi worked together to seize captives, collect weaponry from the wrecked plane, and even attempt to seize control of the island. The scheme fell apart when the islanders Ben Kanahele and Ella courageously resisted. Ben took many gunshots, but he ultimately prevailed and killed Nishikaichi. After seeing the harm he had caused, Harada decided to end his own life. What started as a drama on an isolated island quickly escalated into something far larger in the days that followed. It was cited as proof by military authorities, but for what purpose? To them, it demonstrated that Japanese Americans were untrustworthy. Isn't it unnerving? Over 120,000 Japanese Americans were interned as a result of Executive Order 9066, which was based on a single incident involving only 3 individuals. Even those believed to be loyal to the United States may betray them during a conflict, as the Navy's own investigation pointed straight to Niihau. Historians generally agree that the Niihau incident exemplifies how hasty and unfounded conclusions can result from a combination of panic and isolated incidents. Were the events on a single isolated island sufficient grounds to condemn a whole community? The fact that this mystery persists to this day demonstrates how seemingly little events in the past may have far-reaching consequences. After surviving the Pearl Harbor assault, Ray Emery never thought his life's work would alter the way the United States military honors its dead. Emery, who was born in 1921, was a seaman first class on the USS Honolulu that tragic morning of December 7th. His ship escaped torpedo strikes in the midst of the deluge of bombs and mayhem that filled the harbor. Despite his survival, he was haunted by the memories of what he saw and the lives lost. He served in the Navy for 20 years, all the while holding the position of structural engineer. Upon retiring in Hawaii, he was surprised to find an unexpected calling. National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific was visited by Emery in the early 1990s. Rows of empty graves marked "Unknown," many of which belonged to sailors killed at Pearl Harbor, disturbed him much. For what reason were so many remained unidentified, even after all this time? He felt moved by that inquiry. He made up his mind that he wouldn't allow their identities to be forgotten. He transformed his house into a makeshift laboratory for researching the war, spending hours upon hours poring over dental records, ship logs, and numerous other documents. He set out to reunite these fallen soldiers with their families by meticulously researching and then correlating names with cemeteries in the hopes of finding their identities. His breakthrough occurred in 2003 when the military consented to uncover a coffin that Emery had previously determined to contain the remains of the USS Oklahoma. The identification of the remains was a success, as he had anticipated. That incident was pivotal. It did more than justify his job. The Pentagon began a program to uncover and identify all the mysteries surrounding the USS Oklahoma in 2015, all because of his dogged persistence. Consequently, 361 sailors were duly recognized and given their due recognition. The Navy's highest civilian honor went to Emery in 2012 for his efforts, and in Pearl Harbor, sailors from the Pacific Fleet surprised him with a ceremonial salute. He had fought for the recognition of others' names for a long time, and now he was being recognized as well. One more trip to Pearl Harbor was undertaken by Ray Emery before he passed away in 2018 at the age of 97. His mission had certain that none would be forgotten, as sailors lined the decks to salute him. Isn't that the ultimate goal of any hero? Decades after its sinking, the USS Oklahoma continues to tell a tale of tragedy, perseverance, and extraordinary human resolve. The Oklahoma became one of the first and worst targets for the Japanese bombers roaring over Pearl Harbor on the morning of December 7, 1941. 8 torpedoes, striking the ship's port side with tremendous force at around 7:56 a.m., caused devastating flooding. How could anybody have accomplished so much in that time? Hundreds of sailors were trapped below deck as the ship toppled over just 12 minutes after the initial impact. Among the greatest naval casualties during the attack on Pearl Harbor, the sinking of the Oklahoma ultimately claimed 429 lives. What followed, though, may come as a shock to many. Efforts to recover the wreckage continued despite the immense anguish. In the end, 32 sailors were rescued from the ship when crews painstakingly hacked into the exposed hull in 1942. The enormous responsibility of restoring the ship's course followed. Engineers began slowly rolling the 35,000-ton freighter upright in March 1943 using 21 strong steel cables anchored to the port bottom, totaling 25,000 feet. Think about how much time and effort went into coordinating that. In June of 1943, after a grueling 3 months, the ship managed to stand straight. Still, harm had been done. Decommissioned in September 1944, the Oklahoma was deemed beyond repair by officials. Afterwards, her hull was considered unfit for seafaring, and she was sold for scrap. But there was still an incredibly unresolved issue: what became of the fallen soldiers? Only 35 of the 429 sailors who died could be recognized at the time. The rest were buried in limbo. In the meanwhile, families waited. After then, in 2015, an incredible event started. The greatest forensic identification endeavor in U.S. military history was begun by scientists with the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency. By combining tooth and bone records with cutting-edge methods like mitochondrial DNA analysis, they were able to do the seemingly impossible. They were successful. A remarkable 92% success rate was achieved by 2021 when 361 of the previously unidentified sailors were located. After what seemed like an eternity, families finally got the answers they had been seeking thanks to this groundbreaking discovery. Science and perseverance have the power to alter history's darkest chapters, isn't it? Now, this video has come to a close. Much obliged for your time. Please subscribe, like, and comment if you found this video entertaining. If you want to see more exciting stories, you should watch the video that appears.